Hi, I'm Dr. Fox, licensed psychologist in the state of Texas, and in this video, we're going to talk about BPD in relationships and the emotional bank account. Now, relationships are a central component to BPD. In this video, we're going to identify and discuss the emotional bank account and how you can use it to assess your relationships with yourself and with others. Now, an emotional bank account can be a measure of these relationships, and it can help you not only to see your relationships more clearly, but can help you make some pretty substantial deposits to strengthen those relationships that are most important to you. So let's get into it, and I hope you enjoy the video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and let's get into it. An emotional bank account consists of deposits and withdrawals related to strengthening or weakening your relationships. Now, when you turn towards your partner's request for connection, you're making a deposit. When you turn away, you're making a withdrawal. If you have a zero balance or you go into debt, your relationship is likely in trouble. Now, you want to be a relationship baller for sure, right? Which means you want a lot of deposits. You want a ton of dough. You want to be the Warren Buffett of your emotional bank account. All right. Well, BPD maladaptive patterns adversely affect relationships, and 7 of the 9 DSM criteria involve or negatively impact relationships, causing a withdrawal from your emotional bank account. In many cases, those with BPD don't understand why a withdrawal happens or have a hard time making a deposit out of that fear of intimacy, rejection, abandonment, or emptiness. Now remember, impaired insight is part of every personality disorder, and BPD is no exception. Well, let's try to add to your bank account by increasing that insight so you can make a conscious decision on your deposits and withdrawals from your emotional bank account. In the examples that we're going to talk about, I'll use the word partner, which is sort of a generic term here, and it can include, though, mom, dad, brother, sister, cousin, significant other, coworker, whoever that partner in your life is at that time. Because it's not just a romantic partner, right? We have emotional bank accounts with everyone that we have interactions with. Now let's first talk about those withdrawals, right? Those withdrawals from your emotional bank account. Well, instances and examples include, right? Your partner asks for help and you refuse without explaining why. Another is you check your phone while your partner is talking to you, or you stay on the computer, right, when they're talking to you. And sometimes this kind of stuff even happens to me, right, is that someone will come in and they're talking to me and I'll be in the computer and then I'll be like, okay. But then I kind of remind myself, hey, wait a minute. And sometimes, I got to wear glasses. But, I'll take off my glasses and I'll look away from the computer and consciously look at that person, try to make that eye contact. And you want to convey that sense of value to them. That's a deposit. But in the example of a withdrawal, it's that you're checking your phone or you're on your computer while that partner is talking to you. Another example of a withdrawal is you aggressively respond to a statement that you don't like. It becomes that sort of immediate, right, what I call some default maladaptive patterns, that immediate response because you perceive a threat, right? But that becomes a withdrawal from that emotional bank account. You nag your partner until they give in, right? Nag, kind of needle, right? Until they give in. You indirectly ask for what you want or need, expecting them to know what you need. You criticize or deride your partner, make them feel less than, right? Because sometimes we have this idea that if we can make them feel as horrible as sometimes we feel inside, that we'll feel like we're on an even plane and then everything feels okay. And sometimes even describing this, sometimes with my clients, I'll describe this, that they're in sort of this relationship cycle to both feel low so that everything feels okay, but recognize this is typically not something conscious. You don't sit there and say, you know what, I hope we both feel so low and less than that then we're on an even plane and we'll both feel better. No, because it's not a conscious effort. It becomes this sort of unconscious response. So then you feel like you're on an even plane, and that actually creates that reinforcement for deriding each other, feeling low enough. Sometimes then you feel like you can get a piece of that honeymoon phase by the recreation or the pulling together then of the relationship. And you feel this sense of validation. Oh, see, well, we didn't break up, so we must really love each other, so we'll be okay. But what happens is that emotional withdrawal from that bank account over time, you go into default, right, of the bank account. And that's not exactly the opposite of what you want. The other one is mind reading. This is that belief that, right, I know you know what I'm thinking. And you really have to challenge that. I have a whole video just on mind reading. And the whole thing about mind reading is you just have to be aware that the other person is not a mind reader. They don't know what you're thinking. That's why the conveyance and being assertive and clear is so, so important. Communication skills is something that I work with a lot of my clients. That's something that we often, which is my clients and myself, when we're working in treatment, is that we have that sort of that miscommunication where he or she is like, well, you know what I'm saying. Well, let's not make that assumption, right? Let's be clear. Because in treatment, I want everything to be operational. I want everything to be clear so we can clearly identify what it is and use it as a metric for our goals and progress throughout the treatment of what we're doing together. So no mind reading, right? Don't assume that they know what you're thinking. Assume that they don't. And assume that, that you're going to openly and clearly convey what you want, what you need, and what you're thinking and feeling. Another example of a common withdrawal is using sarcasm in your response, right? That slowly erodes that relationship, right? So it is a withdrawal from your emotional bank account. Interrupting others, right, when they're talking to you. Talking negatively about your partner to others. Blaming your partner instead of taking responsibility when you're clearly at fault. This one can be really tough because I think a lot of folks that are along that BPD spectrum, they feel like any mistake means that the relationship is over. And it's really important to realize that as human beings, we all make mistakes, right? We have to tolerate those mistakes. And we have to be open and understanding of errors, mistakes, sometimes misstatements too. Even from therapists, I say things that come out, sometimes a little like, wacky or are misperceived. But we have to talk about it in a session. We have to work it out. It's really important in relationships too. So, just be aware that if there is something that does happen, you have to take responsibility for it. And I think modeling that behavior helps relationships too. I think it makes it stronger, but we're not at deposit yet. We're still on withdrawals. Another withdrawal is engaging in the same behavior that angers you when your partner does it, such as, right, walking away or slamming doors during an argument, stuff like that. Right? So don't engage in the same behavior that frustrates you. Okay? So then another withdrawal is using you in an accusatory manner, such as you made me mad, right? When, right? So it's that finger pointing. And, I always sort of grab onto the idea that, you have to be careful. If you're pointing your finger at someone else, remember, there's 3 pointing back at you, right? 3 pointing back at you. So we have to be aware of that. I don't think blame helps anyone. Particularly, and I know folks with BPD do this a lot, engaging in that self-blame. You want to discourage that, but blaming others doesn't really do anything either. Let's figure out what the problem is and let's resolve it. Who did it is irrelevant, right? Let's figure out what it is and solve it. Let's become problem-centered. I think that that's a much more effective way to do it, and that would be a deposit, but we're still on withdrawal. So another withdrawal is deflecting responsibility on your partner. Now, when you have to take responsibility for your own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, it's really important to do this because I think, again, we have to model that, which is very similar to what I said just a moment ago. And I think that we do have to take ownership of our own statements and our own responsibility. And when you mess up, I think you got to own it. And I think, though, it's important, I think if you're owning it, I think that also means that you don't deserve to be derided for it. You don't deserve to be ripped on for it. Well, see, you did this, it's not an invitation to tear you up. And I think then that can go to exploring the relationship and then having, an understanding and a conversation with whoever you're in that relationship with, in that relationship, whoever you're in the relationship with. See, misstatements, it happens, right? Yeah. And really sort of talking it out about what it was that caused this, but taking the responsibility, but also understand that, I'm going to take responsibility to not do it again. And that doesn't give you invitation to tear me up. Okay. So, it's important to say that if that happens again, then I think the relationship requires some exploration. But that's a separate video because we're talking about the emotional bank account. Okay. So those are our withdrawals. Now, examples of deposits, right, I'm going to mention next. So if you're on the BPD spectrum, some of these are going to be scary. But it's important to confront those fears and work to make those relationship deposits as often as you can, okay? Some of this is going to require you to push back on that core content that activates that surface structure content. I talk about that in a lot of my videos, right? So we want to be sure that we're not falling into those default maladaptive patterns. Okay, so trying these new behaviors, try them out several times. One and done for mental health doesn't really work that way, right? It's about ice skating. You've heard me say it. It's ice skating, right? The more you do it, the better you get at it. Okay, so what are some examples of deposits? Apologizing when you make a mistake. That's a big one. We got to take ownership. Very similar to what I talked about a moment ago about the responsibility component. We have to take ownership of what we say and what we do. Now, listening and not interrupting or looking at your phone when your partner is speaking, right? So we want to be open, right? We want to make sure that right, whoever the receiver is, whoever you're talking to, that, I'm listening to you, I hear what you're saying, okay? Right? Being open to what that individual is saying and really hear what they're saying. Don't rehearse. In your head, don't rehearse and say, okay, I know what I'm going to say, right? And all of that. You don't want to do that, okay? So what we're going to do is, right, we're going to show that we're listening. That can be done with a nod, right? Things like that. One of the things just to digress for just a second, I remember, so I had a student, and the student and I, we were going to talk to the doctor, and we went to talk to the doctor that was related to the patient that we were treating together, and the student was sitting there like this. And the doctor got really mad. He's like, well, only one of you is listening, so why am I taking my time to do this? And just kind of freaked out. But I think, his behavior was initially massively inappropriate. But I also think, if someone's taking their time to talk to you about a case, things like that, or something that's important, just sitting there like that, probably not the best thing to do, right? We want to show respect. We want to show that we're listening to that individual. Another deposit is spending time with that other, whoever that partner is, playing a game with them, cooking with them, having your partner be the focus of your attention. What do they like to do? What's important to them? What makes them feel heard, recognized, listened to, right? That's really important, particularly for kids. Greeting them with a smile, right, when they come in the door. A big reason why folks like dogs is because dogs get so excited. Right, when you come in the door, like, oh my God, you're home. It's so awesome, right? You may not have to kick it up to the canine level, but, when someone comes in, if this person's your partner, taking a moment, reminding ourselves, oh yeah, first thing I need to do is go, if it is a romantic partner, hug and kiss hello. If it's a kid, hey, recognizing them, looking at them, things like that, really important. So, greet with a smile, right, when you come home. Notice and say something positive about what they're doing. Right? Recognize what they're doing. Recognize their successes. Recognize those kindnesses. In my life, I'm a big believer of encouraging and reinforcing positive behavior. So the negatives, we deal with it, we recognize it, we work through it. Well, if you do something positive, I really want to recognize that. I want to notice, hey, that was really nice. Hey, that was really, clever or whatever. I work with a psychologist, and we had a student, we were talking to the student, and I never realized the other psychologist was a really good conversationalist. Like he really is just good at kind of, starting conversations, carrying lighthearted conversations, really good at that. And I remember thinking, man, I need to tell him he's a good conversationalist, right? And don't think just because, we're psychologists that we're all good conversationalists, because there's a lot that aren't. And so actually the next time that I was talking to him, I said, hey man, you're a really good conversationalist. He's like, what? And I explained it to him. He says, oh, thanks. It's those kind of things, right? We want to be positive. We want to encourage folks as much as we can, okay? And then another example of a deposit is exercise kindness and patience. This can be really hard. That's where our breathing comes in, right? Exercise kindness and patience with others, but with yourself as well. Empathize, right, with their situation when trouble and stress arises, right? What's it like to be in that situation? Really kind of envision yourself in that situation. What would it be like? And if you were in that situation, what would you want to hear as something that is supportive, and decreases that sense of stress? Now, when your partner makes a mistake, this is another example of a deposit. When your partner makes a mistake, right, be compassionate and help them solve the problem. Don't ridicule them. Don't add to the stress, right? We want to recognize the mistake, be compassionate, and help them solve the problem. This is a huge, huge deposit for your relationship, because what it does, it helps you guys pull together in that relationship to solve that problem. That's the stuff that strengthens relationships. That's the stuff that really strengthens trust. And so much of the foundation of all good relationships is trust. Another example of a deposit is keeping your promises. One of the things that I learned as a kid is, if you say it, do it. If you're not going to do it, don't say it. And I'll tell you, that has been such a benefit, I think, to me over and over and over again in working with individuals with personality disorders, because I think so many times in their life, people are afraid of them, or people, walk on eggshells with them, or people are very cautious. So they say things just to pacify them in the moment, but that ends up not being true later. So it actually ends up to reinforce that sense of distrust that the individual with BPD has to the others in their life. See, well, you let me down again. See, you lied to me again. So, I'm a firm believer that if you have a no coming, it's going to be a no. If you have a yes coming, it's going to be a yes. And if it's well, I'm not sure, then let's talk about it and explore it and see what we can do. Okay, so keeping your promises, big, big deposit. All right, so give them little surprises, gifts, or kind and loving texts for no reason. I'm a big, big believer in this stuff. With a lot of people in my life, I like to surprise them with positive. Sometimes it's something really small. Sometimes if I know like they're a coffee drinker or something like that, I'll surprise them with that. Other people, who are working in my office, sometimes, I'll bring in donuts for them, or I'll send them a Starbucks gift card or something like that if they're working with me. It's just something to make them feel appreciated. And it's not in response to anything that they're doing other than just being awesome on a regular basis. And if you're awesome on a regular basis, then I like to encourage that. So that can be something that can help really add to your deposits in a lot of your relationships. And another component that I think is really challenging is you want to give, not give to get. And I remember hearing this, when I was in my master's program, and one of my professors, he was this brilliant guy in marriage and family, big researcher for decades and decades and all that stuff. And I remember him saying that. He said, one of the biggest things that destroys relationship is giving to get. And when we give to get is, well, I'm doing this for you, so then you will do this for me. And that's really, it takes away from the relationship. It makes it very almost procedural, which is that I'm going to do this for you, so you are going to do this for me. Doesn't really help relationships overall, right? It's not really a deposit. It's a business transaction. That's not relationships we're talking about here, right? So if you give, you give. If you get something back, great. But don't give to get. Just give to give. Don't do something nice for someone so that they'll say something back. Don't say I love you with the requirement, and that can be a tough one, but that they say it back. Just say I love you to say it. Just say something to say it. Just do something to do something, not for anything in return. If you get something back, awesome. If you don't, it doesn't mean they don't love you. Don't read into it. Remember, you're giving to give. And you don't want to set up those relationship tests, which I've talked about in other videos as well, so I don't want to get too distracted here from that. Okay, so what are some other deposits? So don't keep score, right? I did this for you, and this, and this, and this, and you don't, right? Don't do that. Don't keep score, because that is going to erode that relationship, okay? Also, give compliments, right? Very similar to some of the other stuff that I mentioned. Give compliments when you see a positive. Encourage the positive. And this, if you're an adult, and maybe with your folks, you may have a rocky relationship. If your folks do something positive, tell them that. Encourage that, believe it or not. Because, even though you're their kid, that dynamic is going to change, and the child is in many ways is going to become the caretaker and caregiver as our parents age. So recognize that, and recognize that relationship changes too. So we want to kind of put your folks on a behavioral plan, sort of, that we want to encourage the positive and decrease the negative. But this can be for romantic relationships, definitely with kids. Like with kids, focus on the positives. Really kind of center in when they do something good, and just fall into it. Like for me, like I just go over the moon, right? When kids do something, really good, whether, they're kids of my clients or something like that, they draw a picture or something, and be like, oh, it's really cool, something, get into it, ask them to tell me about it, stuff like that. So look for compliments, look for opportunities, right, to make compliments on something that you see or something that they do. And then lastly, for deposits, is be clear and direct in your communications. No mind reading, right? We talked about that earlier. Being clear and direct is a deposit in that emotional bank account. Now, a good ratio is about 5 to 1, and that's 5 deposits for every 1 withdrawal. There's a lot of research that shows supportive relationships positively impact the course and success of managing and controlling BPD. Again, these relationships don't have to be with your significant other, but it can be with a family member, friend, coworker. Anyone in your life can be that partner, right, in this video that we're talking about. Okay, this can be anyone and everyone in your life. You can master your emotional bank account. You can manage changes in your relationships, and you don't have to let those BPD, maladaptive patterns, disrupt and decay the relationships in your life. You can do it different. And I hope that you found this really helpful. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Please like, share, and subscribe. I wish you well, and have a good day. Bye-bye.